Welcome to the Due Diligence Podcast, where we explore how leaders make and execute their biggest decisions, from transactions to founding organizations to career pivots and beyond. This podcast is produced by Sleeping Giant Capital. We connect executive talent and capital to invest in West Michigan businesses. To learn more, visit us at sleepinggiantcapital.com or stop by our office in downtown Kalamazoo.
Hi, my name is Doug Lepisto, co-founder of Sleeping Giant Capital. Today, my co-host Olivia Knightsky and I spoke with Jen Randall, CEO of Maestro, about the founding and growth of her company and how she creates organizational culture that builds on strengths and passions. We hope you enjoy our conversation. Jen Randall, thank you for joining us on Due Diligence.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So we got to talk a little bit in the kitchen at tea time, a little bit about your journey to Maestro or starting Maestro. And so we thought we'd start there at that point, which is, why would you want to start a company? So many companies fail when they start up. You've never founded something before. What led you to that point to take a leap and start a company?
Well, I had great question. I had experience at Johnson & Johnson in sales and leading various sales teams there. And in a lot of corporate opportunities, there is a lot of restructure. There's lots of opportunity to kind of flex your leadership chops because you get different teams and different groups that you have the opportunity to work with. And in every single situation over the 10 years that I was there, I just loved the opportunity of creating culture, right? Of creating a team and supporting that team and loving that team and figuring out how I could help them be their best and do their best and find their greatest success. And I think that it didn't, I don't know that initially it really mattered what we were doing, but the opportunity to do it in a way that I wanted to do it and to be able to figure out and really have all the freedom and flexibility to do that as best I could was really enticing. As a matter of fact, over the years, we've had individuals say, it doesn't really matter what we're doing. The culture that we built and the people the talented team that we get to work with is what it's all about. We just happen to be building a learning company, an innovative learning company where we had the opportunity to work with a lot of really cool clients as well.
So were you the kind of person that always wanted to be a founder? Or is this something that you just came to develop as you were working at Johnson & Johnson and said, hey, this building a culture is something I want to do?
I don't know that I would have ever said I want to be a founder, although I grew up with a very entrepreneurial parents and had experience even at age 13 where I was an Avon lady trying to peddle makeup to all of my neighborhood ladies because of the fact that I did not want to earn money through babysitting. That wasn't really my shtick, but I opened the newspaper and there was an opportunity to be an Avon lady. So I called the number and I had my little Avon bag very early on. And then it just continued from there. I was always active doing something.
And is that starting process, walk us through how did you have ever fears at this point of starting a company, or you haven't done this before? Are you excited? You just rolling the dice? Like, walk us through those early days.
Yeah. Well, one thing I probably should have shared, I did start when I was at Johnson & Johnson, I on the side started a little Great Clips company, right? So that wasn't starting from scratch. That was building something that was already there, but then figuring out how to hire the right people, build the right culture, have the right processes in place, those types of things. I did that the year before I started Maestro, and recently just sold that off because it was just not something that really held my interest, quite honestly. So now I've forgotten the question.
And when you're starting something, there can be the real excitement and the pull of doing it. There can be the, oh my gosh, why are we deciding to do this? This seems crazy.
Yeah.
What's the early feelings you have when you're going to make that leap and go somewhere where I don't know how you're going to figure out the funding for it, how you're going to figure out your salary, how you're thinking about benefits, and yet you still decide to do it. So what are you thinking at that point when you decide to do that?
So I will share, I am very faith-based. And so I had no intentions actually of leaving Johnson & Johnson initially. I loved what I was doing. I loved who I was working for. I loved the team that I had at the time and all the work that we did together. And then this opportunity presented itself, but I really had to kind of ask myself, I'm climbing the ladder through J&J, and they're really supporting females and everyone who has the desire to be able to do great things with that company. And so I didn't really it wasn't like I was itching to start this, but I will tell you that once the opportunity presented itself, I prayed about it and immediately felt that it was time to let go, which was crazy because we lived in South Carolina at the time. We had a beautiful custom built house, 2 company cars, like everything that we needed. We were very comfortable. And to recognize that we were going to leave all of that and move from that area and do what we needed to do was daunting, but yet because I received the confirmation that I needed, it was not scary. And even in times over the last 15 years as a business owner, when there have been scary times, I just know that we'll work our way through it.
What was the true confirmation point? Was it faith-based? Was it
100%,
family?
100% faith-based. Yeah. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. I'd still be at J&J if I had a different response. Well, likely, who knows? That's 15 years ago, but yeah. I'm so grateful for it because had I not received that confirmation and moved forward anyway, there could have been a lot of times over the last 15 years where it would have felt very scary because that's just there's risk involved with ownership. And we started a business from our back pockets. We did not have any capital. We worked with what we had and moved from there.
So you faith is then critical to you as a leader, and it's something you go back to then when you're making, because our podcast is really focused on how leaders make their biggest decisions. Mm-hmm. So you're a really analytical person as well, along with your faith. Mm-hmm. How do you balance those two as you think about founding or as you think about other decisions that you're making?
Well, I think with faith, you have to go through the actions first, right? And you have to do your due diligence, and then you can go to your knees and ask. And so one does not happen without the other. And you can't go and seek answers if you've not actually done the work first. So it's like a 1-2 punch, and receiving confirmation after you've done all that you can do, and then figuring out if that's the right step moving forward or not.
And you started off co-founding Maestro.
Yep.
What is it like? What was that experience like, having a partner alongside of you as you made those early decisions and kind of got things going?
It was great. It was awesome. It's wonderful to have a partner and be able to walk through things together and communicate about what's working, what's not working, and kind of wrestle through those challenges together. So as a matter of fact, we ultimately, a couple of years after we started Maestro in 2007, we started a separate company, another company, because as entrepreneurs, you always find new things, right? Mm-hmm. And so we started a separate company and then ended up spinning that company off. And my partner went with that company. And then a couple of years after that, we sold that company. And he ended up staying there. And I ended up buying him out at that point.
So it sounds like you're the kind of person that likes to create things with other people. Mm-hmm. Is that you?
Yeah, for sure.
And what is it? What have you learned about doing that effectively? We've just hired Liv. We've hired, our CFO. We're in the hiring phase, and so you now have. It's not just you as individual founder making something. Mm-hmm. You're now creating something with other people. Mm-hmm. What have you learned about how to do that effectively as you kind of grew Maestro here over time?
So there's a really great book that I read a couple of years ago called 9 Lies About Work. And one of the things that the author... Nine lies. Yep. And I'm trying to... Marcus Buckingham, and I'm trying to think of the other person's name who wrote it. But anyway, they... Ashley, I think. Anyway, they talk about how important it is to recognize everyone's spikiness, and what that is what everyone is unique at, what they're good at, what they bring to the table. I think that in many workforces, people talk about creating someone who's well-rounded, right? Even when I was at Johnson & Johnson, you need to be good at this and this and this and this and this to be able to, and have these competencies to do your job well. And what they talk about is that we're not well-rounded. We're all spiky. We all have these really unique gifts. Mm-hmm. And that's what is so important, is to create a well-rounded team. And so it's not an individual that you're looking to be well-rounded and being frustrated that they can't do this or they can't do this. Instead, like, what do they do that's really well, that they do really well, that's really just specifically unique to them? And then how can you create a spiky, bring the right spikiness together to create this well-rounded team? And that's really what I've learned, is that we hire really talented humans who love what they're doing and love working with other talented humans. And that's how we all grow and learn together. And it doesn't mean that I'm suddenly going to be great at these things because I've hired them. We're going to use our strengths and talents to do great things together.
Spikiness.
Yeah. How do you feel like the spikiness comes into getting people you work with out of their comfort zone? So maybe trying a new skill that they're not the best at.
Yeah, I think that generally as a small company, you're out of your comfort zone on the daily.
It's true.
Yeah, I think that it's not about trying to get people out of their comfort zone. You may have a spikiness in a certain area, but you are going to be using it in all different areas, or working with other people who have other talents. So in a small company, you're wearing a lot of hats and you're figuring out what that looks like and feels like to you, and then moving from there.
And so we've had the opportunity to work with you and your team on a couple things. Mm-hmm. And what's great is it's from the graphic design element to the e-learning element to the video element, across your team. And what is interesting is everyone that we've interacted with at Maestro, I can definitely see the spikiness, mm-hmm. their own unique thing, but there's also something, it seems like, that's very the same. There's some kind of spirit, ethos. Mm-hmm. And how would you describe that at Maestro? And then how do you actually bring that about, that culture about daily at Maestro?
Mm-hmm. So I love that you share that.
It's totally true.
I love that.
It is.
I think, well, first of all of us want to work with good humans, right? Kind-hearted people who really want to roll their sleeves and do the best work that they can together as well as with others. But I will say that I read a book a number of years ago called Delivering Happiness by Tony Hsieh, founder of Zappos. He wrote the book, and one of my main takeaways, there's a lot of great takeaways in that book, but one of my main takeaways was around creating core values. And so in 2011 probably, we took the time and really figured out, what are our values? What do we value? And then we cemented those. I say cement because we blew that up just a little bit a couple of years ago, and then created something that we really feel even better about. We wanted them to be really understandable. And so we created 5 values, and then we rolled those out to the team, and they just get embedded in everything that we do. They get embedded in decisions that we make. They get embedded in how we attract and find the right talent. They're part of all of our one-on-one discussions with our team members. It's something that we live and breathe.
So that looks like on an evaluation you're going to have with an employee, you're saying value number 4 is whatever that is, and you're looking for evidence of them displaying that behavior, that value.
I wish I could say that we had evaluations. We don't have evaluations.
Okay.
We don't have any performance reviews.
Performance reviews.
No, we believe in ongoing feedback. So we have one-on-one discussions every week. Every leader does with their team members, and we have really honest conversations about growth and where people are and what their challenges are, or they're really set up for the employee to be able to bring to the table what's important to them. But if there's something that's coming up that we need to talk about that's value-based, we can do that as well.
Weekly feedback sessions.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Really tight feedback loops is what they are.
And is that what got you into that practice? Is that learning based, or?
I can't remember if that was a Brene Brown something or other, or if that was just I love reading. I love reading and learning. And so usually it's just a combination of different things and recognizing there's an opportunity to have tight feedback loops. So you have the opportunity to constantly be communicating around what's working and what's not working. And generally things are working. So we generally don't have to have an opportunity about what's not working. But if there is something that's not working, we want to make sure that we're addressing that as quickly as possible. And you don't have to wait for the meeting that takes place next week. You can take care of it right then and there.
Yeah. I mean, I like the shortness of that, because then you're not waiting until 6 months in and having a feedback session on something that happened, 6 months ago.
Yeah. big corporate like a J&J, we had every 6 months, we had, a mid-year and an annual review. And you're right. By the time you got there, it was dated. And if you didn't have a conversation about it and it ended up in a review, that was not a good thing. And in those systems, it was on a ranking, a number ranking. No matter what ranking that ranking was, when you give that number to that person, it's a number that just is like deflating. And so I probably, the pendulum for me swung probably so hard the other way that I was just like, oh, I don't think we're doing this. I don't know that. I think that there probably is maybe something happy middle, but we're not quite there yet.
When you're building culture, you're trying to get people to act not in a similar way, but with a similar ethos. And what I find, and Liv would probably agree with this, she's been with us for 2 months now, is you're trying to get some culture things to stick. Tea time, little performance evaluations. It gets brought into the culture in various ways. What's also really interesting is to know that a lot of the things you bring in sometimes don't stick. Or they come and they go. And so sometimes starting those traditions or those things to embed they just magically happen. So do you have any lessons about how to make those values stickier, that they stay versus something that kind of it's fleeting, it comes and it goes? I
think that if I'm understanding correctly, I think that if everything hangs on those values, right? So if you are creating, I would call those artifacts. So those are all examples of artifacts of things, and they should tie back to a value. If they don't tie back to a value, then it probably won't stick. But if you're creating an opportunity, I'm trying to think of a relevant example, but if you're creating something and you're going to put your time and energy into that, you want to tie back to something that you've already deemed as really important. And your likelihood of it sticking at that point is really high. So if communication, for example, was a value, or high communication, or I don't know, if something specific was a value of yours, then you would think through what are all the artifacts that you could create that would support that specific value. And then I think you have a greater chance of having something stick.
Are you the embedder of culture, or are you looking to your team to be the ones that bring these things about?
I think I would say that initially I probably was the biggest cheerleader and supporter of them, but I feel with the team that we have now, they're so wickedly talented that I just sometimes stand back and marvel at what they come up with that I wouldn't have come up with. But I will say that, inspiration comes in a lot of different forms, and sometimes that's in collaboration, or sometimes that's when you're doing some deep work on your own. And so it's really just comes from all angles.
I remember us having this a similar conversation about this a couple months ago. And you said, I think something to the effect of, though, that it's still your company, that there is a sense of that you still lead this company. You're maybe not the one that's on top saying this is the value and everyone's going to do it. How do you see yourself now that you've had Maestro kind of, it's a breathing, living thing? You've kind of stepped back. What's your role now vis-a-vis the culture? Are you more of a nurturer? Are you more of an observer, a commentator? What's your role now if you're now maybe not embedding it as much?
I think it's a little bit of all of those things, right? There are some things that everything is in evolution, right? So nothing is, you started it and then it ended. Like, we're just in the middle of starting some growth discussions at Maestro where we can have some 8-week cycles and really great discussions. And that is something that I'm leading and we'll be rolling out. And then we'll be putting in the team, my leadership team's hands. And they've all been in reviewing the document and adding in their thoughts and giving their insights and input and those types of things. And then once we roll it out from there, I don't really like to say this is how you have to do it. Here's our guideline. And then here are 4 different options for how you could roll it out, or you're going to probably find something better. And we're going to experiment this year and see how it goes. And we look forward to making changes and making it iterative. That, I think, is maybe not the answer specifically to your question, but I think that as we go through various projects that we roll out or that we want to have a part of the culture, we have to recognize that we're all going to experiment. Nothing is set in stone. We're going to see how this works and all learn and grow together. And then as we do that, then we can gain that feedback and make those changes along the way.
So in the experimentation with your leadership team, what does failure look like? When a leadership team maybe fails on something, like what does that look like?
I don't believe in failure. I think that you learn from everything that you do. I do. I think that there are always opportunities to grow and learn. I think that even my business coach does not like when I use the word should. I should have done this. It's not even actually in my vocabulary anymore. In the last 5 years, it's been eliminated. And now when I hear other people say, I should have done this, no, you could have done that. I mean, that was an option, but this is the option that you took. And what did you learn from it? And then as you learn from it, then you can learn, okay, there's like a million other options in terms of the direction that I could go, or what did I learn that actually is going to impact my next decision? Because it's just a series of decisions.
But it makes people feel much more open to trying things, taking a risk and letting something go and not worry about I should have done this, I should have done that. I'm going to get, beat up.
Totally. You can't actually innovate if you're constantly shoulding yourself. I mean, you really can't. You can't. Yeah. There's no room for innovation if you're constantly worried that you're going to do something that is going to be wrong. Do
you think that's a similar mindset in like larger corporations that, people have this fear of failure, whereas maybe at Maestro, they might be smaller where they don't have that?
Yeah, I definitely think that larger corporations, because they have a much larger group and steering that ship is maybe could be seen as more complex, right? And some of those decisions. But I even think inside of organizations, I think even in the last 15 years, more corporate organizations are doing what they can to ensure that fear of failure is removed so that people can use their whole brain and everything that they have to be able to put out whatever the problem is that they're trying to solve.
So you said you can't innovate if you're shoulding yourself.
Needs to be on a t-shirt.
Shoulding yourself, right? This is a family. So you can't innovate if you're shoulding yourself. Okay. So let's talk a little bit on leadership. You've, I think, described yourself as more of an introverted leader. Mm-hmm. And I think we've had conversations before where you've said you'll probably be the last person to speak.
Unless I'm asked.
Unless you're asked.
Unless I'm sitting out there in the front of everyone and you're asking me some questions. I'm happy to answer them, but yes.
So you'll be the last person typically to speak, would you say, in those kind of conversations?
Yeah.
And how has that style helped you? That because you often think, or not you, but people often think leadership, first one to talk, very talkative, mm-hmm. And you're more quiet, more of a listener. Mm-hmm. How has that style served you in your leadership?
So we talked a little bit ago about spikiness. So one of my attributes is listening. So I am a good listener, and as a result, I can sit back and observe and see what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling and sensing. And so if I'm in a meeting with 5 leaders or with all 12 of our leaders, I have the opportunity to just hear what's going on, whether it's being spoken or whether it's unspoken. And in those situations, I have an opportunity through listening to hear and feel what those next steps might need to look like. Again, my business coach many years ago said, like, you need to use that skill, right? And you can just sit on your hands and just marvel at this incredible leadership team that you have in front of you that is doing remarkable things and hear what they have to say. And that was such great advice, because I love when I get the opportunity to do that. And I actually feel that allows me to then come out with wise comments, right? And after I've listened to what everyone has to say versus just off the wall comments that may be fleeting or in the moment. So I love it when I have the opportunity to sit back and listen. And if I didn't have such a great team of leaders, that maybe would be a little bit more challenging. But now at 15 years and with some leaders that have been with us for 10 plus years, it's really amazing.
Spoken and unspoken. Mm-hmm. So what does that look like on the unspoken listening and observing?
I think that there are always leaders leaders have different talents, right? And you can sense when something is said that may cause another leader to bite their tongue or not say what they need to say. And then you can be ready to ask for their opinion when it makes sense, because you know they have one and you know it's going to be profound, but maybe they're not feeling comfortable saying it for whatever reason. And so I think when you sit back and you are not doing as much talking and you get a chance to really sense what's going on in the room, there's a lot of power in that.
Do you encourage your leadership team as well to sit down and listen? Or are you, when you sit down with a meeting with them, are you like say everything you have to? What is your take on that?
I think that everyone has their own style, right? And I don't want to, let me back up. When I was at J&J and I was kind of hiring 10 mini-me's for the sales team, essentially, because I felt like I knew the best way to approach sales and in those roles. And now I recognize I don't want 10 mini-me's. I want 10 other individuals who have unique perspectives and gifts and ideas. And so I want them to follow their own style, but there are some common courtesies, right? There are our values that really help them to understand how they should or could lead their one-on-ones in a way that will be compassionate and loving and allow everyone to be able to be at a place where they feel like they're safe and they can share what's on their mind.
I'm a big champion of introverts because I can be very extroverted, but I can be introverted. But what I see almost is not bias, but I do see bias against introverts, especially in job interviews, especially with young people. You know, they're expected to talk. They're expected to be, and certainly they need to be able to share. They can't not share, but the notion that they're going to be a listener first and they're going to be quiet first is almost, it almost is set up to put them at a disadvantage sometimes. And I think what you're saying is so important, that to be the one who really listens and to be able to recognize when someone in the group needs to contribute, or maybe someone needs to maybe not contribute, is when you're going to get the best stuff out of the team. But is that your experience on being more of an introvert? Have you had any challenges with that, or?
I can totally see what you're saying 100%, because I think that 10 years ago, there were lots of articles written about who leaders should be and what they're looking for in a leader. But since then, I've seen articles that come out just the opposite, right? That maybe support where I'm at. But I just think that the answer is that there's not a one size fits all. There's using everyone's strengths again. So some people can stand up and be incredibly motivational by using a loud booming voice. And that is just not me. When I'm leading we have a monthly team meeting, and I have the opportunity in a couple spots to jump in and share. That's just, it's not me. And then if I'm trying to be that, then I'm being disingenuous to who I am and inauthentic, and the team can feel it. Whereas instead, if I just come across who I am, they can sense, they have a better appreciation for who we are as a company and how we're leading and what's important to us.
Justice, wouldn't you say that Liv and I are the most introverted on the team, Justice? Is that true? No. Okay.
Definitely the most extroverted.
Liv, yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about, so there's, what have been we're going to talk about some of the challenges and then some of the joys of leading Maestro now. And how long has Maestro been around?
15 years.
15 years. And you have how many? Last time it was above 50?
Yeah, right around there.
50 employees. One thing that you hear a lot from leaders, maybe not so much publicly, but we've had it on the podcast, and my wife and I talk about it because she's leading an organization, are some of the real burdens and challenges of being a leader. What have those been for you, and how do you overcome those? You know, the demands of it, the people side of it, the stress of it. What have been those challenges? How have you overcome them?
Well, I could answer that in a handful of ways, and we don't have enough time, I think, to talk about all of them. I think that because we didn't take on any capital, right, and we still haven't, finances through the pandemic were definitely challenging. And so we have large organizations that were hit, and as a result, that hit us. So right before the pandemic hit, we had, Royal Caribbean totally went, they had to really pull all their contracts with us, and Southwest Airlines and Marriott and Best Western and everyone that was, that was impacted to such a high degree, and that they were cut. And we suddenly felt like, oh, wow, we have a big team, and we've got to, because we have a big team intentionally because we want to make sure that no one is overworked, that they still have balance in their life. But that became really challenging during that time. So that was hard. And then economy, right, it can be a little challenging right now. And so that also is challenging. So I think that has been and continues to be, just during the time that we're in right now, something that we're just continuing to figure out and work through. The people side is, I feel like that's not really a huge struggle that we have.
You guys have perfect people over at Maestro. So
I cannot tell you how much I adore our team and every single person that works there. So everyone, I can just think, I have all these, people flashing through my head that I get to work with on a daily basis. I think that's also been a bit of a challenge, is that our office, once the pandemic hit, we have a beautiful 8,500 square foot office.
Exposed brick. Yeah.
So many windows.
Sunlight.
Yeah, it's really incredible. And we were, before the pandemic, ready to burst into the floor below us because we had a first right of refusal on the floor below us. We had 12 interns coming in that summer. It was really exciting. And then that hit and everything halted. And we went home. Fortunately, just based on the nature of our business, we were able to be home and working up and running within 24 hours. It was actually really remarkable, based on the technologies that we use, how quickly that was able to happen and really not miss a beat. But we all got pretty comfortable at home. My little office in the attic is kind of my favorite place to be. And usually I'm on meetings all day long. And so to go in the office, our Maestro office, and sit in a little room by myself with a laptop isn't as appealing as being in my office upstairs, where I have in my house a monitor and can just be back and forth. So that is probably the case for 95% of our team. So we have a big open office, and we don't have a team that's utilizing it. And we've worked on different things, but my personality and our culture isn't that we're going to demand that anyone come back to the office. But yeah, we have 5 years left on our lease. So figuring that out is...
SGC could use some new space.
In about 4 months, we might need a temporary space.
Yeah. So, you talk about all of these changes and, your company working from home and through the pandemic, but were there any early days or late days, even through the pandemic, where you were just like, should I cut my losses? Is this the end of my business? What did that look like? Yeah,
no, never had that experience. There were hard times, but again, going back to how I started the business in faith, that has pulled me through everything. I've never had that feeling.
That's great.
So do you have stress? You seem so calm and mellow all the time, and you seem so calm and happy, and no caffeine, and now you're on plant-based diet and all these learnings that we need to have, right? So what is that part of the leadership role really not something that has hit you in terms of, the stress of being a leader, or is that it's been mostly good?
There's always stress.
Yeah.
There's always stress. The trick is just to not, what was it? The Hulk, where he learned that the trick is just, I'm trying to go somewhere that I don't even have an opinion on. But anyways, I guess my answer is that there's always stress. You just have to learn how to manage it and balance it with everything else, and be grateful for all the things that you do have, and recognize that you have a team of people to work through these things with. You don't have to do it on your own.
So the stress is not something you experience, but not something that, weighs you down or that you struggle with. It's just there. It can be unpleasant, but you've got your faith, you have your organization, and you feel like that kind of gets you through those humps.
Yeah, I think so. I think the other thing to keep in mind is that anytime there is stress, there's growth on the other side of that stress. So if you just recognize that, yes, it's going to be uncomfortable, and sometimes uncomfortable really stinks, but you will have the opportunity, if you take the right opportunity and you have the right mindset and the right attitude, to recognize that there's growth on the other side.
And let's round out with what's been the greatest satisfaction as a leader now that you've got, I think I asked you this when we were on the panel, that you've got a 50-person organization that you created, that you didn't single-handedly, but you've ushered in. What's been the greatest joy of that?
I think I would go back to the team I get to work with every day. That's really the greatest joy. There are 50 souls that I wouldn't have met 15 years ago had I not had the courage to jump in, and that jumping in has certainly had its ups and downs, but the people that I've met and the way that I've grown as a result of learning from them and learning together as an organization is really a huge joy. Like, that's what this life is about. We're here to grow and learn, period. If we don't recognize that, then it can be a really long road. And so usually the question is, well, what am I supposed to learn in this situation? What exactly do I need to take out of this?
Mm-hmm.
And if I can go in with that mindset on everything that's going on, whether it's good or bad, and there are both, then I think you can look at it with the right attitude that can help you to be who you're supposed to be and lead how you're supposed to lead.
So what have you learned thus far in having Maestro in the 15 years?
Oh,
what
man.
would be your number one takeaway?
That's a loaded question.
There should be tons of,
There's so many.
You had to sum it up into one takeaway sentence.
Oh man, I feel like I need some quiet head down time to think about that one. I just think that we need each other, right? We can't do it on our own. And if we tried, it would be awfully lonely. And so that's really a special part of entrepreneurship, is finding others who have the drive and the passion and the energy and want to lock arms and want to figure out how to do it together. And so I think that sometimes, especially as entrepreneurs and especially as leaders, you feel like, I should know this, or I should have done it this way. Again, should have, or why haven't I learned this yet? Or imposter syndrome, like all of those things. And instead you just need to like let all of that go and just recognize that we're all just learning every single day together, but you can't do it on your own. You can have quiet time or, deep work time or whatever. And that's really important. But that collaboration with others is where ideas just build and turn into something that's magical.
So it sounds like you would do it again.
Totally. Oh my goodness. In a heartbeat.
And so what would be your message to others who are considering it?
Just do it. You just got to go for it. And if you can let go of the stigma of failure, right? And the stigma of not being enough, or the stigma of anything that's in your way. Like everyone has their own thing, and just recognize that it's all for our own experience. Then what would stop you if you feel like this is something that you're interested in doing?
I like it. Let's round out with some rapid fire questions. So first one, do you have a favorite term, business term? Could be a financial term, an accounting term,
culture
Do
term.
you have a favorite term that you either like the sound of it, or you think it's overused, or anything comes to mind?
So the only thing comes to mind may not actually be answering your question. I didn't realize that I used the phrase, I'll kick it to you. So like if I'm going to send an email over, or I'm going to Slack someone, we use the tool Slack, I didn't even know this until a friend of mine pointed it out. And then now they make fun of me, but I'm constantly saying, look, I'll kick that over to you, or something, in those lines. And so now that I've had awareness brought to it, I catch myself saying that all the time.
I'll kick that to you. Like it. How about something you wish you learned in school, now that you've been a successful founder and entrepreneur? Mm-hmm. What do you wish that you learned in school but didn't?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I am not a finance major. I'm a middle school teacher. That's my degree. And so I have a great accountant and a really awesome bookkeeper. And there have been many years where I've had to get the Scotch tape out and figure out how it's all going to work, how cash flow is going to work together. Yeah. That would have been something that probably would have been more helpful. But I mean, we make it work.
Okay. And last one, do you have a hidden gem in West Michigan? It could be a restaurant, a cafe, a beach, a park that you'd want to give a plug to.
Yeah, I think Jean Clock Beach over in South Haven or Benton Harbor area. Have you been?
No, Jean Clock Beach. Mm-hmm. I have not. Yeah,
Jean Clock Beach. I think you get a pass. You can get a pass annually, or you can buy, I think it's $5 when you go otherwise. And I hate to say this out loud because it's kind of a quiet little spot, but when the Maestro team goes out to the beach, that's where we go. And there's a super cute Benton Harbor downtown area that has great restaurants and, a little art gallery, and it's just super quaint. And then the beach is not far away, and it's you don't have to walk a mile. You don't have in the hot sun or the hot sand. You park right up next to the beach, and it is so beautiful. We love it.
Glenn?
No, Jean.
Jean Clock Beach.
Yes.
Okay. Great. Well, Jen, you always have great insight. I always feel calmed. And
very calming presence.
Clarity on what matters and what doesn't matter. And we appreciate all the work we've got to do together with building Sleeping Giant, and then also your support of what we're doing at Sleeping Giant, empowering more women. So it's been great to work with you. Great to chat with you.
I love it. Thanks so much. Thanks for having me.
Thanks.